All right. So for those watching at home, we've had 5 breakout groups with robust conversation, and we're taking a quick break for a couple of key insights coming from each of the 5 groups. And first up from this group that was in the front is Emil Runge from the North Carolina manufacturing ecosystem. Emil.
Appreciate it, Matt. This is phenomenal. Really appreciate the opportunity. I think we're going to go ahead and walk away with one key takeaway that we would like to see moving forward on this one, because we know there's going to be a long list. But AMCC could be a logical convener for a national network based on key verticals. So as we think about those verticals, which states, which regions are really leaning into those into those verticals for potential collaborative opportunities to really move the needle. An example that may make sense on that one is if you're in automotive, then that's going to make a ton of sense for, say, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Alabama. And so moving something forward in that regard would make sense. Whereas if there is an initiative around, say, biotech, then it might be North Carolina, Massachusetts, Kansas City. So how can we possibly go ahead and find those verticals of interest for potential collaborations that are not just geographic, but they're also vertical or cluster based, so that we can really build the resiliency and also the strategy for the nation in manufacturing in the years to come.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Emil. Let's go back in the back, the big group in the back. Shaylin, you want to come up here and report out what that group was? They're a very inclusive group, I would say, for those watching at home. The biggest group in the room. So this is Shaylin Giotishi from New America Foundation.
Super. All righty. Can everyone hear me? I'll talk loud. Shaylin Jotishi from New America. We had a great discussion in the back, and thanks to Jennifer Shee for tag teaming the note taking here. So a couple of takeaways from our session. There was a big conversation around the balance that needs to be struck between having state buy-in on regional initiatives versus allowing for that bottoms-up approach. You know, at some level, you would want the governor to support whatever it is you're applying for before you get too far underway with the application process, because that could help get you the match you need, which is especially important, we heard, for smaller states or states with fewer resources. But on the other hand, there was, you know, a conversation around balancing that. Governors come and go, but the ecosystem, the community members, tend to have some level of longevity. So, you know, thinking about how federal agencies could be a little bit more cognizant of that in the messaging around RFPs came out in our group. Another piece of focus for us was thinking about the sustainability from the beginning. And this also ties in for state engagement, thinking about the baton handing from the award period ending and, you know, what comes after that baked into the planning process is something that our group felt needed a little bit more attention. And I think, oh, it's working. How about that? I'm sorry, folks. Now, should I repeat myself? No, I'm just kidding. And, you know, the last thing I'll say, just to be a little expeditious here, is that there was a recognition in our group on just the value of applying for awards, even if you don't win, and the longevity and outcomes you get that in an ecosystem, which is something difficult, I think, for policymakers to wrap their minds around. Well, we didn't get the money, but good things can come out of the process of going through things together, as team sciences has taught us in recent years. So those were a couple of takeaways. I'm going to look to my group here to see if there's anything else anyone would like to weigh in. All righty. Well, there you have it. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Shaylin. Let's do the group over here. Yeah. The price of one. Absolutely. What the heck? Yeah. This is a network building, so we're going to model it right here. Yeah.
That's right. We're capitalizing on that trust conversation from earlier. Yeah. Stephanie Santel, EPA, and
Josh Kramer, Blue Forge Alliance.
okay, so our group really focused, I would think, primarily on the third to last question here about useful tactics, building trust, developing a network, not just within the company, but within the broader community. And so a couple of things that we settled on was having usable data at the local level and also consistency in funding as kind of key inputs to that decision-making structure, and also being able to support the right dot connection that needs to happen within the community and within the needs of the actual manufacturing business itself. For tactics, thinking about aligned focus and seeing how each person in the company fits into the broader efforts that are going on or that they're undertaking, but as well as the community members and maybe other partners in some of the initiatives that manufacturers might be implementing and the interventions that are working for them. And then we talked a little bit more about the climate issues and kind of the risk angle of the manufacturing business. So one of the things that we talked about was the need to have kind of this comprehensive policy messaging and also strategy development at the top levels, maybe at the federal government, state government, but then the importance of where execution should take place and implementation. And that's very different when we're talking about training opportunities for the workforce, when we're talking about what level funding should actually be deployed and designed and who we're designing those funding opportunities for. And how climate risk can play into not only thinking about your supply chain, but your value chain, and the bottom line operations that kind of feed what you're trying to do. And did I miss anything there?
Yeah, I think some of that was just the comprehensive approach to these regions, right? So not just manufacturers, not just trainers, but having folks from healthcare, having folks from transportation, having folks from local economic development sitting at that table, so that when we work solutions to these, if we say we need 5,000 employees in a region, what happens if we were successful? Do they have somewhere to live? Do they have somewhere to eat? Do they have a grocery store? What happens to the 2-lane road going into town that now needs to be 4 lanes? There are all these kinds of things that I think, and part of that is when everyone's sitting at the table rallying folks, not just in quote unquote partnership, but roles and responsibilities, and having not only where your role is on that team. We use the analogy of a baseball team, right? We have to have a strong shortstop, but we can't win without a strong catcher. We can't win without a great center fielder. And so everyone has a role on the team in order for us to win and play well. And so that was a big part of it. And including things like making sure that, it matters to manufacturers to have things like strong healthcare and access to healthcare and those kind of things the same way. So it behooves everyone in a region not just to think manufacturers and not just to think talent and some of the really big things that I think we all know that are givens, but some of those other supporting structures that make families thrive in that community too.
One last bit about funding and financing, super important. So this was a great ending point for us, was talking about de-risking and kind of mitigating risks between sectors and different kind of actors that are coming in to support your business. Absolutely, building up partnerships can help mitigate the competition between folks for securing funding for specific initiatives, but also thinking about diversifying sources of funding for those initiatives, so public-private sector funds, as a way to think about multi-benefit projects and, for example, if you're doing mitigation and adaptation solutions together, really smooth out and kind of de-risk the investments to those companies. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's the ecosystem approach, right? So we've got to operationalize it on the ground. All right. So how about this group right here? Dan?
I know I'm going to miss something. So we were all over the place. So yeah, and I think we only got through the first item, and then we went down a rabbit trail on how to support small to medium-sized manufacturers, which is really important, of course. But just the first item around consortium development and challenges with that, especially as we're looking to help support manufacturing regionally. It's, each one of us in our respective regions have, struggled to do that. What we recognize is you really need a team of organizations. It's not all on your MEP, right? You need, in Michigan, we're blessed. We have regional manufacturing associations, about 12 of them, in different parts of the state, West Michigan, East Michigan, Upper Peninsula. So when we went about our I4O journey and transformation program in the state, we had the MEP kind of leading, with the I4O readiness assessment work. And then they partnered very closely with the regional manufacturing associations to get the outreach. The outreach is really difficult, especially with small to medium-sized manufacturers, again, because you typically have the owner that's the business development lead, the HR lead, the operations lead, everything. So you need many touch points, and that means you need many different organizations supporting that that effort before they're maybe might pick their head up and pay attention to the programs that are available. Not to mention support policy that would support those programs. Yeah, yep. And then we also talked about, well, what can we learn from the U.S. manufacturing institutes, right? Because they're public-private partnerships. And what we recognize about that is it really depends on what type of programming and services you're trying to offer the manufacturers, because many of the manufacturing institutes are focused on earlier technology readiness levels, manufacturing readiness levels, and a certain industry player is going to gravitate to that a little bit more. A lot of small to medium-sized manufacturers need to make implementations that are going to provide a return on investment in short order, like within a year or two. And then we talked about the importance of consortium development that not only improves the companies, but has a much broader economic development lens. And what I mean by that is not only making manufacturers more efficient and resilient and helping them ultimately be more globally competitive, but I'll give you an example. Our I4O program, we also launched an I4O accelerator along with the I4O implementation program in the state of Michigan that provided grants. And we went out and tech scouted globally, found the best I4O companies, and then introduced them to manufacturers. And it created so much business for those companies that they moved to Michigan. We've had more than 36 companies move from Silicon Valley to Israel, Germany, Japan, all over the place. And those are the high-tech jobs that are replacing some of the manual worker jobs that maybe are less exciting or ergonomically unsafe, or like we talked about, manual inspection jobs are usually the first to go when you introduce AI inspection systems. And I had one of those jobs. It was miserable. I was bad at it. Right. So, and again, if you look at what was successful for the US and Industry 3.0, all the robotics companies came to provide those solutions to US manufacturers. And they're all high-tech jobs, designing, engineering robotics, installing, maintaining. So it's no different with I4O and artificial intelligence companies. We want to get those solutions introduced into US manufacturers and get all the service providers that are providing those solutions to set up shop in US no matter where they originate.
Yep. So thank you for that. One more group in the back. Nikhil, cool.
Hello again. We had a pretty great conversation. I would touch on three main issues that we covered. We first began with talking about, with AMCC, I think a lot of the conversation we've had is there's a federal top-down approach and a kind of regional bottom-up approach. And from some of the conversations that we heard this morning, I think that structure is also recreated at the state level, where there's, not only regional bottom-up efforts, but sometimes state top-down efforts as well. And the importance of having both of those and what to do in regions where you don't quite have as much of a state level buy-in as you would perhaps want. One of the points that was highlighted is that without that state level buy-in, especially with some of these recent federal investments, it's hard to coordinate. If your state has received both a DOE hydrogen hub as well as a DOD investment, if you don't have that state level leadership, there's not coordination happening between those two programs, and there's no way to make the sum greater than the whole of its parts. And so that was point one. And from there, we kind of moved into the role that large manufacturers can play in coordinating these ecosystems without state intervention, especially in areas such as California, where you have, Google and Meta and so on and so forth, coming up with AR, VR systems that then spur innovation amongst a whole electronics component manufacturing supply chain. But when we're faced with that type of a system, what do we do when we want to turn it on its head and focus on supplier-driven innovation and dynamism rather than just waiting for kind of anchor firms and large firms to coordinate the supplier ecosystem? We didn't really have any answers to that, but we identified that it was a difficult problem for us to think about solving. Perhaps so we need a Manufacturing USA Institute around machining and prototyping, or something like that. But right now it's a tricky issue about how to actually coordinate these suppliers without an anchor firm or an anchor tenant. Was there anything else I missed that I think we should touch on? I don't know. I'm looking at the people in my group. I don't see anything, so I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikhil. And thank you, everyone, for participating. Let's keep that conversation going. Lunch is here. So we're going to break until 1:40 when we have the federal agency panel. So thank you. And let's keep those conversations rolling.